to another Biz Buzz segment here on the Blank Page to Bestseller podcast. As always, I am joined by Colleen and CaZ, and on this week's Biz Buzz segment, we're going to talk about libraries, specifically how libraries and authors, whether you're an indie author or a traditionally published author, might work with your local library, because who doesn't love to go to the library and pick up a big old sack of books to read for the week? I don't know. Colleen, CaZ, let me ask you first. Do you guys use a library? Have you been a library patron for a while now?
I have. I've always been a library patron. Uh, I didn't do it for a few years, but I recently re-upped and got a new little tag so that I can get books out online or through the actual library.
And I do too. I have a library. I have a current library card. I don't use it as often as I used to because it's not actually physically convenient for me, but I sure do use it online. So
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's a great, maybe in the future we could do a whole library segment, because there's just a lot of awesome services that are, provided by the libraries, that, let's just say, when I was growing up they didn't have. But like, I know, like, our local library, we have some great access to like some of the local like newspapers and journals and things like that around town that we get through our library, which is really neat. Not to mention just being able to go and listen to ebooks, or even just sit at the library and pick up a book and read while you're there. That's a great place to kind of step away from the craziness of the world. But I definitely want to start with today's segment by pointing out that any author really can work with the library. There's no real limits on what it takes to be a library. I saw a really cute post. I forget if it was on Threads or if it was on, yeah, Facebook or LinkedIn or one of those things, but I saw a little post of a library who had a young, like, I think she was like a kindergartner, put together like her own little like book. She drew little pictures and had a little story, and they bound it together and put it up on the library shelf. So it was really cute. It was really cool, but it really does go to show that libraries are there to try to, just spread words, spread books and have fun and have, support authors no matter what. Um, yeah, so we do want to talk about a couple of the things. First of all, like I said, we said, hey, authors can talk about, or authors can work with libraries no matter what. Do you guys, have you guys worked with a library or know any authors that have worked with libraries to get their books into libraries? CaZ, let's start with you.
oh sure, whenever I have an author that I'm working with who wants to have their books in a library, I always ask that question early on when we're talking because there are things that we want to start with. But I actually think Colleen has better information on this than I do because I think she's worked with more authors who've gone into libraries than I have.
Well, we have actually tried and worked with authors to get on it, but some of them haven't really taken that next step. We worked with mostly their children's authors that we've worked with that we've helped them take the steps to get into the libraries. Uh, Going in and actually marketing to the library and talking to them about getting their book in. And it really does make a difference to make that connection with the libraries, and they'll know who you are and what to look for when they're going into marketing. It's just like a marketing campaign, a separate marketing campaign. And I read recently that authors can make a library uh, expert sheet, like a sheet to give to the librarians, expressing what the book's about and giving them all the information that would entice them to perhaps go ahead and put the book on their shelves.
That is definitely something I hadn't thought of, but that is a great way to, like you said, kind of expand your reach to libraries. Like, every bookstore has their own little niche that they're trying to work on, to sell. So, you may not be a match for every bookstore, but let's just say that there's pretty much any kind of book you can ever think of that's been found in libraries. So, it's a good way to kind of maybe put yourself and your book in the forefront in some of the librarians' minds, because there are just such a vast number of books that libraries stock.
Right. And also was reading something up about how authors can actually provide like author talks at the library or
Mhm.
look for programming, some programs that they might be having that's on the topic of their book. And then
Mhm.
they can talk to them and find out if they can, support that or, give a small little talk or introduction about their book and work towards that for programming and other things.
That's really, really a great piece of advice, because I don't know about everyone, but I know our local library is very big into, they've got lots of programming throughout not just the summer, but, for throughout the year, for kids, for adults, for just fun things, educational things like that. And they're always looking, it seems like, to have some more programming to provide library patrons. And one thing that I know that libraries love is to work with local authors. It's really important. There's usually when we go into our local library, we usually see either like an end cap or a table or something that's highlighting specifically the local authors. And what better way to do that than working with your library?
Right.
And
And I go on, Candy.
oh, no, I'm just going to add to that, Colleen. That it doesn't have to be an official program.
Right.
Many of your larger libraries, in particular, maybe not a small branch, but many of your libraries will have a room that you can either rent or get for free. You can reserve where you can do your own book signing. You can
Mhm.
bring in your own books, and they may not let you sell them right there, but you can bring in your books and people and give them a sheet where they can go order them.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, we've actually done that. Colleen and I did that a few years ago. We took a little three-branch library tour, and gave a talk on why it's important for authors to, or why it would be why you might want to become an author. So, I thought that was really a great use of our local library. And if you're an author, what better way to, again, pair up with your library than working with them on some either official or unofficial programming with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but we were talking local authors. Do you guys, when you're picking up a book, try to find local authors, or are you, um, obviously we're all supportive of all authors, but is that something that kind of piques your interest a little bit, trying to see what other people around town or around your area are writing about?
For me, it does. And it actually, for all the authors that we have helped, I've gone into the, Barnes and Noble or the Joseph Beths or Books a Million, and I've actually checked to make sure that the authors are at least in the system if they're not on the shelf. And
Mhm.
so that's been interesting to just
Mhm.
go and find that information out. But yeah, I look for the all local authors if we can, or at least in the genre that we're
Mhm.
working, and seeing if they're local, because it's fun to see that and then request it if
Mhm.
it's not on the, shelf. Like, oh, I'd really like to look at that.
Yeah.
Well, and as an author ourselves, I mean, I think it's also important that you may not have a community that you belong to specifically of fellow writers, but it's nice to know that they're out there.
Mhm.
So I know I always look when I go into my local library, I always check. I also check the bookstores because
Mhm.
almost every bookstore that you go into, especially the smaller ones, is going to have a section on local authors. So
Yeah,
I
and
think
I
it's important.
well, sorry,
So
I said bookstores, and I really meant the libraries also, but I agree with KZ there that um, doing both is good for the author.
Mm. So let me then just ask this next question. So you might be an author listening to this, listener, dear author. As you're listening to this, you might have a book coming out, or you might have a book that has already been published, but you're not necessarily in a library, or you want your book to be in a library, but you're not really sure how. Um, Colleen, KZ, either one of you can take this, but is there something specific that an author should do when they're looking to get their book into a library?
Colleen, go for it.
Well, definitely what we've learned, and to my knowledge, it has not changed, and we do this, is an author needs to make sure that they get a Library of Congress cataloging number in order to ever have a chance of being in the library. And that is where they catalog them by a certain number. The BIASC, is that the one? I can't remember, but they
So,
you get that and you apply for it before the book is published. That's what's important. Before the book is published, you want to get that number and include it on your copyright page so that you know that it's there. The author, the purchaser knows it's there. So that is one rule that we really strongly suggest for people, even if they don't know if they want to get into the library, but maybe 3 years down the road, they want to get in the library or start marketing to the libraries. So they've got that number so that the librarian can order the book. And KC, do you have anything to add?
yeah, that process, I think probably the most important part of that process is that you want to do that before you publish the book. So when you're getting your ISBN number, you want to go ahead and apply for the Library of Congress. And it is so easy. It doesn't cost anything. It's just a matter of sending the form in and then sending them a copy of the book once it's published. That's really all that's involved with it. But there's also a way. So say you've already done some books and you haven't put it in there, you can always donate your book to a library,
Mhm.
Obviously, if the goal with the library marketing is that you want the library to buy multiple copies of your book so that they're going to actually have multiple copies available to loan. But if you just want to, if your goal is to get your name known in the area, it doesn't hurt at all to donate.
Mhm. That's a good point. I think they're both valid options to getting into the library. And I think that if your goal is to get into the library, yeah, find whatever way works best for you. But yeah, I think like Colleen said, it's important to do that before you publish to get your LCCN, just because who knows, in the future you may want to do it. And like KZ said, it's quick and easy to do that as well. Quick, easy, and free, which is nice.
Aren't that many things that are free? It's always good.
Exactly. And then also, who wouldn't love to say that your book is part of the Library of Congress? Like, that's pretty cool. Like, when you think about it.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Very. Yeah.
So let's just say you get your book published, you have your LCCN, and then you're like, oh my goodness, how do I actually get the library to order my book? One thing that I do want to point out is not every library is going to pick up every book. That's clear. There's not enough space in the world for every library to have every book. But depending on your library system, there might be a couple of books that are, in circulation at the many different branches. I know we have here, our library's got, can't remember how many, but a lot of branches, but obviously not every one of them has every single book. So first of all, how do you ask somebody in the library, or how would a library find your book? Like, do you have people go in and ask for it? Do you actually go in and ask the library if they're going to buy it? Do you talk with someone in particular? Is there anything specific that an author should do?
Yes, to all of them. One
Yeah.
of the things you have to do for sure is it is important to you as an author that you go in and ask the library to order the book. But even beyond that, Colleen, wouldn't you agree that it's important that this is part of your marketing and your publishing strategy up front? You want to make a decision to when you're choosing to publish your book, you need to choose the appropriate publishing house. Okay, printer essentially is what you're really choosing, the appropriate printer, whether it's digital or print, paperback or hardback, or even ebook, or even audio at this point. You really want to pay attention to what you're choosing if your goal is to have libraries find it easily in the catalog. Colleen, I know you have some good experience with this.
Well, I think what you're talking about is the Ingram Spark way,
Yep.
going through Ingram Spark. Yeah, we always suggest for our readers or authors to go through Ingram Spark, because then it's print on demand, but you actually can get into the libraries, because of your LCCN, and then you're on that library catalog, in the catalog.
Mhm.
And so when libraries, get requests, like people, one marketing strategy is for authors to request that their readers, they're in their email, they can say, please request my book at your library. And if they have a lot of requests by different people, they're more in tendency to get the book into their library. But that's a marketing strategy for the authors. And even put it on your website. Request my book at your library's branch. Whatever. But definitely going through Ingram Spark is going to help you get into the library easier, because it's easier for the libraries to find your book through the online digital system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. We were kind of talking about this in our pre rundown, our pre-recording rundown, but between I guess the three big players in digital print on demand things right now, you've got Ingram Spark, you've got Amazon, obviously the two big ones, but then KZ, you mentioned Draft to Digital, and I keep on forgetting about it because it is kind of an up and coming player in the game. But those are probably the three big ones. And of those three, Ingram is the only one that has a specific library price for your book. Am I
Correct.
correct on that, KZ?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, Peter. I don't believe either Draft to Digital or Amazon has a library price available. And all that means is that the library can find a book in the Ingram catalog, and they can buy it for a different pricing. One of the challenges for all of us as authors is that if our books go out into the Ingram catalog and out into the general world of bookstores, we run the risk of having to have those books come back to us, but we've got to pay. We essentially got to buy them back.
Mhm.
Okay. But the libraries don't have that. They don't do that. They have the special pricing. So yeah, we're not earning as much commission or royalty on the book with the library pricing, but the libraries don't come back on us either. So once the
Mhm.
library buys the book, the author is gold.
Mhm.
The library's got it, and yep, they paid a little bit less for it, and we're paid a little bit less for it, but it's not going to come back and bite us later on if they didn't sell.
Mhm.
Does that make sense, Peter? I don't know if I explained that well.
No, that does make sense. And yeah, it is a different price that other retailers like Amazon, like Barnes and Noble, like Books a Million. They buy it for one price. The libraries buy it for a different price. And that's just, again, like you said, just a library specific price so that, you don't have to you don't have to deal with all of the returns and the damages and things like that you might with some of the other or
Yeah,
some retailers.
exactly.
Yeah,
So
which is really important. If you're doing a library, if you're doing a library campaign or a library push, even if you're on Amazon or Draft to Digital, we would suggest, creating an Ingram account just with, your one format that you want to get into the library, just so that you can have that library access. It might make your endeavors a little easier.
absolutely. And I mean, you can print as many versions of your book as you want.
Mhm. Exactly. And it could be the exact same version with just a different ISBN on it. That's all that it really takes. You don't have to do any more crazy designing or have a new cover or anything like that. You could if you wanted to, but you don't have to. You just have to, set it up in the correct way.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about everything about libraries. So we've covered one, how an author might work with a library just in general programming, or maybe working with them to put on a little book signing or something like that. That's really important. Two, we've talked about how an author can get into a library, like the behind the scenes things. LCCN, definitely important. And then we've also talked a little bit about how a library buys a copy of the book from an author. Like we said, we definitely suggest Ingram Spark for that side of things. Colleen, KZ, is there anything about libraries and authors that you think we've missed today in our talk?
Not really, other than don't take them for granted. because your
Mhm,
book could get in there. Might take some work, but all marketing takes some work. And
mhm,
go for it if you'd like to.
I totally agree with that, Colleen. I think it's very important that an author have a. We've talked about this many times. Your book is your business,
mhm,
and part of your business is to put that book out and make it available in as many markets as possible. And libraries are a huge market.
mhm,
Believe me, the big name authors out there, they don't have to do all of this because libraries are ordering the books anyway. We have to
mhm.
do a little bit more when you're starting out, and maybe you don't have quite as many people who are reading your books, but that
Mhm,
doesn't mean that you can't be in as many libraries as you'd like to be in. You just have
mhm.
to plan for it and make it happen.
Exactly. And one thing I do want to point out too is, kind of take this conversation a little bit of a different direction. But, I always think that as an author, or yeah, as an author, you want to have as many people read your books. Yes, if you get the book in the library, not everyone's buying your book necessarily. The library does buy your book, but you might have 10, 15, 20, 100 people read that one copy of the book. But here's where it gets really nice. Maybe you're a fiction author. They read one book. Hey, guess what? You have 3 books. And guess what? I've bought books from one author that got the first in the series from the library. So that's sales right there. Maybe you're a business owner or, professional speaker or something like that. That's 100 different eyeballs on your book, that you're not going to get before. So, libraries are a great way to really spread your word, your story, and connect with readers in many different ways.
It's about building your brand as an author. It's all part of it.
Exactly. Well, authors, then, if you have any questions about libraries, or maybe you're a librarian who's listening and you have any thoughts on how an author could get into the library, maybe we missed something, or maybe you want to expand on something we've talked about, let us know. Hop down in the show in the comments. Let us know, reach out, and we'd love to talk more about libraries, about authors. We're always looking to have conversations like that. So authors, librarians, whoever's listening, let us know you hear it down in the show notes. We'll let you know. We'll get back to you. Love to have a conversation. But until next week, then I'm going to say have a great week, and we'll be back with another Biz Buzz segment next week.